So today is the last of a series of three lectures on the topic of, is there hope for the future? So you may recall on the first day, we looked at the current state of society, the current state of the world. And when you reflect on the current state of the world, it is a bit depressing. But we showed how there are many reasons for hope for the future. The immediate future looks rather dark, but the distant future is incredibly glorious, incredibly light. In the second lecture, we discussed Baha'u'llah's vision of a new world order, of the most great peace. And today, we're going to explore the idea of how this vision has unfolded, and most importantly, what is our duty? What is our responsibility? What role do we play in this whole process? The House of Justice, in one of their recent letters, reminded us that when we're trying to look to the future, we should also understand the past. It's very important to understand history, to see where we are. They say, ensure that in all efforts made to acquaint the friends with the nature of this collective enterprise, the perspective of history is kept fully in view. So I'm going to start with a little bit of history. I think it's important to realize that this world order of Baha'u'llah goes back to the very, very beginning. Even in the Persian Bayan, which the Bab wrote when he was in the prison of Maku, he actually alluded to the world order. And it's quite interesting, he actually mentions Baha'u'llah in that connection. It's very interesting because at that time, Baha'u'llah had not declared his station as him whom God shall make manifest. His station is the one foretold by the Bab. The Bab wrote, well is it with him who fixeth his gaze upon the order of Baha'u'llah and rendereth thanks unto his Lord, for he will assuredly be made manifest. I think it's also quite significant too, as I mentioned yesterday, that at the very, very beginning of this new era, the Baha'i era, which started in 1844, on the very evening that the Bab declared his mission to his first follower, the Bab actually revealed the Gayamul Azma, the commentary on the Surah of Joseph. And in that work, the Bab actually invites everyone to participate in this cause. And he expressly mentions the people of the West. He invites the people of the West, Europeans and others, to participate in this cause of a new world order. Well, I think many of you know that Baha'u'llah's declaration unfolded in stages. So I think I mentioned yesterday that when Baha'u'llah was in the Siachal prison, he had his first intimation of prophethood, and the maid of heaven appeared to him in a dream and told him that she would render him victorious by himself and by his pen. And then later, in the Garden of Rezvan, Baha'u'llah actually started to tell people about his station. On the first day of Rezvan, he revealed to some of the friends, some of the members of his family, that he was the one foretold by the Bab, that he was a new messenger for this day and age. But it wasn't a very public declaration. It was just to the people gathered in the Garden of Rezvan. And then a couple of years later, when Baha'u'llah was in Adrianople in 1868, he actually very publicly disclosed his mission. In fact, in the most public way that you can think of, because Baha'u'llah wrote to the kings and rulers of the world. And this process started in 1868, and it continued. And some of the rulers of the world are addressed in individual tablets that were addressed specifically to them, and others were addressed in the Kitabi Aqdas. And some of these tablets were brought together into a work called the Haikal, the Surya Haikal. And that was a very significant work of Baha'u'llah. And on the screen here, you can see who some of these leaders were. You know, we had Emperor Napoleon III. He was the ruler of France. He was probably the most powerful political leader in the world at that time. There was Pope Pius IX, and Pope Pius IX was not only the head of the Catholic Church, but also Pope Pius exercised sovereignty over the middle of Italy. The papal states were under his control. We also had Nasruddin Shah, the Shah of Persia, the king of Persia. We had Queen Victoria. Queen Victoria reigned over over a huge empire. They said that the sun never set on the British Empire. It was so vast. We also had Franz Joseph of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. He had a huge empire within Central Europe. We had William I of Germany. Germany had started to emerge as a significant power. We had Sultan Abdulaziz. He was probably the most powerful monarch in the Islamic world. The Ottoman Empire was vast. And he wrote to all of these leaders. And you may also to Tsar Alexander II of Russia. And again, the Russian Empire, was huge at that time. So you may ask yourself, well, why did Baha'u'lláh write to these people? And the reason is that really they had within their hands the control of a huge swathe of humanity. They were incredibly powerful monarchs and leaders. And they had the ability, if they had chosen to actually share Baha'u'llah's teachings with their people. And if you look at the territory that they controlled, either directly in their own kingdoms or through their colonies, it was vast. A significant part of humanity was under their control. Now I have to remember that when Baha'u'lláh was addressing them, Baha'u'lláh was a prisoner and an exile. Have you ever heard of a prisoner in exile writing to all the leaders, the significant leaders and rulers of the world? And not only writing to them, but actually writing to them and asking them to submit to him, to his cause. That is probably unprecedented in history. And it's very interesting when Baha'u'lláh addresses them, he's speaking with the voice of God. He's speaking as the vicegerent of God. He's not speaking as a philosopher sharing some new ideas. He's not speaking as a theologian. He's not speaking as a political scientist that had just, through lots of research and dedication had come up with the perfect political theory. He's not speaking as a diplomat or statesman. He's not speaking as a philanthropist. He's not speaking as a human rights campaigner. He's not speaking as somebody who had this genius idea for the reconstruction of the world. And he's not speaking as a mere leader of thought. Baha'u'lláh is very clear that he is speaking as a representative of the divine, and that he has come with a new message, and he's come to inaugurate a new era. And if you read the letters to the kings and rulers, it's quite striking how direct Baha'u'lláh is. He doesn't conceal his station. And I just extracted one passage from his message to Pope Pius IX, and you can see how direct Baha'u'lláh is. He says, "O Pope, render the veils asunder. He who is the Lord of lords is come overshadowed with clouds. And the decree hath been fulfilled by God, the Almighty, the unrestrained. He verily hath again come down from heaven, even as he came down from it the first time. The word from which the Son concealed is made manifest. It hath been sent down in the form of a human temple in this day." So reading this, the Pope could be of no doubt who Baha'u'lláh was. Baha'u'lláh was clearly saying that he was the return of Christ. And I think it's quite interesting, too, that Baha'u'lláh really reflects on his station. He says, "O temple of holiness, we verily have made thine inmost heart the treasury of all the knowledge of past and future ages, and the dawning place of our own knowledge, which we have ordained for the dwellers of earth and heaven." So again, Baha'u'lláh comes to us really with this innate knowledge. It's not a learned knowledge. He comes with a mission. And Baha'u'lláh undertook his mission not at his own initiative. Baha'u'lláh said that, the only reason he arose to proclaim his mission and these teachings is because he was prompted by God. And I think it's quite significant, too, that, Baha'u'lláh, when he was writing to the kings and rulers of the world, he was not asking for any political power. He was not asking for any money. He was not asking for an army to release him from prison. He was asking just for the hearts of the people. He says, by the righteousness of God, it is not our wish to lay hands on your kingdoms. Our mission is to seize and possess the hearts of men. And I think what Baha'u'lláh was symbolizing by this is he was symbolizing that basically this movement, this new era is only going to take hold by changing hearts, changing human hearts. It's only through the heart, it's only through love, through good deeds, that this mission of his is going to succeed. And I think Baha'u'llah's discourse is very interesting. When he addresses the kings and rulers of the world, he explains that they are the trustees of God. He says, know of a truth that your subjects are God's trust amongst you. Watch ye therefore over them as ye watch over your own selves. Beware that ye allow not wolves to become the shepherds of the fold, or pride and conceit to deter you from turning unto the poor and the desolate. For me as a lawyer, this is quite an interesting quote, because actually he uses a legal term, that of a trust. And when you establish a trust, you have a trustee, and the trustee has a fiduciary obligation to act in the best interest, not of the trustee, but of the beneficiaries. So Baha'u'lláh is basically telling the kings, look, you're merely trustees. You're not supposed to accumulate wealth for your own benefit. That your subjects, your people, are the trustees, are the beneficiaries of this trust. And that you, as a king, owe your people a duty of care, a duty of prosperity. The king has no mandate to enrich himself. And if you look at the history of the 19th century, you'll see that actually that's exactly what many of the kings and rulers did. They used their kingdoms to build huge palaces and to enrich themselves. There are even examples in Europe of kings who actually created kingdoms that were not even in the name of the state, but were in the name of them personally. We see what happened with Belgium and the Congo. The king of Belgium actually himself, took over the Congo. That was his personal territory for a long time. And the population of the Congo went from about 20 million to 10 million under his stewardship. He exploited that country mercilessly. Baha'u'lláh again reminds the kings and rulers that really their treasures are not these palaces, they're not the crown jewels. The treasures are the people. Lay not excessive burdens on your peoples. Do not rob them to rear palaces for yourselves. Nay, rather, choose for them that which ye choose for yourselves. Thus we unfold to your eyes that which profiteth you, if ye but perceive. Your people are your treasures. Beware, lest your rule violate the commandments of God, and ye deliver your wards, again another legal term, to the hands of the robber. By them ye rule, by their means ye subsist, by their aid ye conquer. Yet, how disdainfully ye look upon them. How strange, how very strange. Again, the concept of a ward in legal theory is that the guardian is supposed to take care of a ward. They're under your protection. Often somebody is a guardian for a child who's underage, and that child is the ward. And I think Baha'u'lláh again is telling them, look, you have a duty to take care of your people. In the previous quotation we saw that included everyone, particularly the desolate and the pure. So it's really a whole different concept of power that Baha'u'lláh is introducing into the discourse. And again, we see, and we discussed this a bit yesterday as well, that really nobility belongs to everyone. Nobility is not just something that is associated with kings and queens and monarchs and emperors and empresses. Abdu'l-Baha explained that Baha'u'lláh taught the oneness of humanity. That is to say, all the children of men are under the mercy of the great God. They are the sons of one God. They are trained by God. He has placed the crown of humanity on the head of every one of the servants of God. Therefore, all nations and peoples must consider themselves brethren. They are the branches, leaves, and flowers and fruits of one tree. They are pearls from one shell, but the children of men are in need of education and civilization, and they require to be polished till they become bright and shining. This is our legacy. We have this inherent nobility, but this nobility needs to be cultivated. It's interesting as well that the Bab, in one of his early works, he basically said that, that everything, it was in his book, The Book of Names, that everything there can be called, that everything represents qualities of God. And then he talks about the king, how the king is supposed to reflect, majesty. But then he takes the most humblest person in society at that time, which was the peasant farmer. And he said even the peasant farmer represents God, because the peasant farmer is engaged in cultivation, is engaged in nurturing. And these are also attributes of God. So everything is an expression of the divine. And I think by doing so, the Baba is also demonstrating this principle that we all, share in common this divine spark. So Baha'u'lláh invites all of these rulers and others to embrace his cause and to establish the most great peace. Shoghi Effendi explains that in his tablet to Queen Victoria, Baha'u'lláh, addressing the concourse of the rulers of the earth, revealed the following: "That which the Lord hath ordained as the sovereign remedy and mightiest instrument for the healing of all the world is the union of all its peoples in one universal cause, one common faith. This can in no wise be achieved except through the power of a skilled and all-powerful and inspired physician. This verily is the truth, and all else naught but error." So Baha'u'lláh is inviting the kings and rulers of the world to actually join his cause, to embrace his faith. Well, I think you know what happened. They rejected this appeal. So Baha'u'lláh issued another appeal, and he called for them to embrace a lesser peace, a political union of all nations. Baha'u'lláh says in this same tablet to Queen Victoria, he says, "Now that ye have refused the most great peace, hold ye fast unto this, the lesser peace, that happily ye may in some degree better your own condition and that of your dependents." And I think in the course of this lecture, we'll talk a little bit more about what the difference is between the lesser peace and the most great peace. We know that the lesser peace is somehow associated with the convocation of a world assembly that will bring the kings and rulers of the world together to make a political peace. It'll be like a body without a spirit. It will not be the same thing as the most great peace, but it'll be better than what we have right now. And we're told that the situation in the world will become so dire that humanity will realize that the only way to survive and to continue is for the world to come together. The time must come when the imperative necessity for the holding of a vast, all-embracing assemblage of men will be universally realized. The rulers and kings of the earth must needs attend it, and participating in its deliberations must consider such ways and means as will lay the foundations of the world's great peace among men. Should any king take up arms against another, all should unitedly arise and prevent him. So Baha'u'lláh is introducing the idea of collective security, that all of the nations will come together, they will fix the boundaries of every country, they will agree the principles that will govern the relationships among them, and then they will bind themselves to uphold this new pact. And if any country steps up to violate this new pact, then all of the remaining countries of the world will oppose it. Baha'u'lláh says, "The lesser peace is the greatest means for ensuring the tranquility of the nations. It is incumbent upon the sovereigns of the world, may God assist them, unitedly to hold fast unto this peace, which is the chief instrument for the protection of all mankind. We're told that once the lesser peace comes about, it will begin a process of the reconstruction of humanity. Well, I think you know what happened. Not only did the kings and rulers of the world reject the most great peace, they also rejected Baha'u'llah's appeal for the lesser peace. Baha'u'llah in one of his writings says, "Everyone well knoweth that all the kings have turned aside from him, and all the religions have opposed him. From time immemorial, they who have been outwardly invested with authority have debarred men from setting their faces towards God. They have disliked that men should gather together around the most great peace, inasmuch as they regard and still regard such a gathering as the cause of and the motive for the disruption of their sovereignty." Baha'u'llah is explaining that the kings and rulers are not going to embrace the cause because they're very worried about losing their sovereignty, losing their temporal power. And we have anecdotes about some of the reactions of the kings and rulers. We know, for example, that when Napoleon III received Baha'u'llah's tablet, he was reported to have flung it, behind his back and said that if Baha'u'llah is one God, then I'm two gods. And then he directed his minister to write a very nasty letter to Baha'u'llah. We also, can see by their conduct, what the reaction of some of the other kings and rulers were. So, for example, we know that Badi, who was a 17-year-old, took the message to the Shah, Baha'u'llah's appeal to the Shah, and he was tortured for several days. He was on the rack, and finally he was executed. Queen Victoria is the only one who said something slightly positive, but she didn't fully embrace his cause. She says that if this be of God, it will endure. If not, it can do no harm. And she seems to be paraphrasing the Acts of the Apostles, chapter 5, verses 38 and 39, where it says that if this counsel or this work be of men, it will come to naught. But if it be of God, ye cannot overthrow it. It was also interesting, too, that the Grand Vizier, who was like the prime minister of the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, when he read this tablet from Baha'u'llah, his face turned white because he said it's as if the King of Kings is addressing, the humblest vassal, because the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire ruled a massive territory, and Baha'u'llah was actually his prisoner, and yet this prisoner is addressing him as if he's just one of Baha'u'llah's vassals. Baha'u'llah says, again in the Epistle to the Son of the Wolf, "Men have at all times considered every world reformer a fomenter of discord." If you look at history, you'll see that any reformer who has sought to bring significant change to improve human society has always been opposed. And obviously, this is most true of the prophets of God. In the Bible, it says that a prophet is not without honor except in his own country and in his own house. And I think it's just interesting for us to kind of reflect, what would have happened if these rulers had embraced, the cause of Baha'u'llah. They ruled a tremendous part of the globe, and they had tremendous influence. And if they had not acted as a barrier between Baha'u'llah and their people, if they and the religious leaders had not filled the people with prejudice, it's interesting to reflect, what could have happened, what may have been. In fact, the Baha'i international community, in their message, in their statement, One Common Faith, which was released in 2006, actually kind of speculates a little bit about, or they ask a rhetorical question about how different things could be. It is impossible to imagine how different the history of the past century and a half would have been had any of the leading arbiters of world affairs addressed by Baha'u'llah spared time for reflection on a conception of reality supported by the moral credentials of its author, moral credentials of the kind they profess to hold in their highest regard. History would have been dramatically different. We would be living in a much better world. But unfortunately, they didn't. And I think they probably have a lot to answer for their sins of commission, but also their sins of omission. And also the same is true for the clergy. Baha'u'lláh says that if these obstructing veils, and by obstructing veils, he's referring to the clergy of Iran, if these obstructing veils had not intervened, Persia would, in some 2 years, have been subdued through the power of utterance. The position of both the government and the people would have been raised, and the supreme goal, unveiled and unconcealed, would have appeared in the plenitude of glory. We said whatever had to be said. Thus, once Persia had been rehabilitated, the sweet savors of the word of God would have been wafted over all countries, inasmuch as that which hath streamed forth from the most exalted pen is conducive to the glory, the advancement, and the education of all peoples and kindreds of the earth. Indeed, it is the sovereign remedy for every disease, could they but comprehend and perceive it. Again, this is another possibility, that we had in history, that if the clergy had embraced Baha'u'llah's cause, the Baha'i faith would have spread throughout Persia, and within 2 years, the Guardian also explains, it would have subdued Persia, and Persia would be rehabilitated. And this rehabilitation would have been noticed by the rest of the world, and the fragrance that would have emanated, from that rehabilitation, from the new society of love and affirmation, and peace that would have appeared in Persia would have spread to the entire world. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. But it could have happened. And I think what it means is that, and because of that, I think we see that the influence of the kings and rulers of the world has diminished. And the same is also true of the clergy. The clergy does not have the same prestige that they had in the past. And even in certain countries where the clergy has risen to power, they no longer have the same respect and the same sway over the minds of the people of the country. Baha'u'lláh says, from 2 ranks among men, power hath been seized, kings and ecclesiastics. So I think really now it means that this new world order, this most great peace that Baha'u'lláh envisioned, will be built from the bottom up. And I think that means that, we Baha'is have even a bigger role to play. Each one of us, can work at the grassroots to share and diffuse, Baha'u'llah's vision throughout the world. We talked a little bit about the lesser peace and the most great peace. As I mentioned, Baha'u'lláh first invited the kings and rulers of the world to embrace the most great peace. The most great peace was to embrace his cause, to affirm his truth, to create a new civilization based on spiritual and moral values. But they didn't accept that. Then he said, okay, take the lesser peace, which is really the political architecture for peace. It was almost like a utilitarian peace, not based on love and spirit, but on survival, where each of the nations would come together and agree to the principle of collective security, where they would protect one another. I've extracted a few, passages from Baha'i writings, as well as paraphrased a few concepts, but you'll see that the lesser peace is really initially a political unity, and it's going to be arrived at by the decisions of governments. The Baha'is will not directly participate in this process. It'll be associated with a convocation of world leaders, in which measures for unity and concord will be devised. As I mentioned before, Baha'u'lláh explains that it will be the greatest means for ensuring tranquility of nations. He also explains that 2 entities will push for its realization, the governments of the world and the peoples of the world. The situation in the world will become so dire that both governments and people will be pushing for a new system. This will also be preceded by the recognition of the oneness of humanity. And as I mentioned before, it's going to involve the reconstruction of mankind. And we should also think of the lesser phases as lesser peace, as occurring in different phases. I think it's going to gradually unfold over time. The most great peace is something different. The most great peace is actually proclaimed by those who profess belief in Baha'u'llah's faith. And it'll be preceded by the lesser peace. And then after the lesser peace, it's envisioned that there'll be a process or a period of the spiritualization of the masses of humanity. We'll start to see moral values, spiritual values, ethical values starting to permeate humanity. And we believe in the future as well. Baha'u'lláh envisions that there'll be some kind of Baha'i commonwealth. That eventually there'll be states where the majority of people will become Baha'is, and they will elect to have a Baha'i state, and these Baha'i states will somehow come together in some form of commonwealth. And this will give birth to a new civilization. The most great peace is not just peace, it's a completely new civilization. And the Guardian says, the golden age will be an age in which the face of the earth, from pole to pole, will mirror the ineffable splendors of the Appa paradise. Again, this will fulfill the promise of Jesus Christ to bring the kingdom of heaven on earth. And again, here is another depiction of this. It starts with this recognition of the oneness of humanity. Soon it will lead to the lesser peace. And then there'll be a long process of the spiritualization of the masses. And then we will have the most great peace, the golden age. And one thing that's quite mysterious is that this seems to be somehow associated with the administrative order of Baha'u'lláh, the most great peace. Shoghi Effendi, the beloved Guardian, says, "It is the structure of his new world order, now stirring in the womb of the administrative institutions he himself has created, that will serve as both a pattern and nucleus of the world commonwealth, which is the sure, the inevitable destiny of the peoples and nations of the earth." Also in another place, Shoghi Effendi writes, "Its administrative order is the harbinger of the golden age and future glory. This administrative order will come to be regarded as it recedes farther and farther from our eyes, as the chief agency empowered to usher in the concluding phase, the consummation of this glorious dispensation." So I think we all have a very important role. The more that we strengthen the administrative order of our faith, the more we secure its foundations, the more we're actually laying the groundwork for the most great peace. And I think it's very important to remember that the administrative order that Baha'u'lláh introduced is unique. There's a secret strength to it. If you look at all of the religions of the past, after the passing of the founder, they've created institutions, but those institutions were not directly, outlined by the founder of their religion. So they've had to add a lot of man-made ideas and concepts to their institutions, and these institutions have evolved in time. But the architecture of these institutions were not really detailed by the founders of religions of the past. And as we know, as history went on, many man-made concepts were accumulated, and these institutions, in many cases, didn't really bear any real semblance to the teachings of the leaders of other religions. But the Baha'i administrative order is different. Shoghi Effendi explains, "This administrative order is fundamentally different from anything that any prophet has previously established, inasmuch as Baha'u'lláh has himself revealed its principles, established its institutions, appointed the person to interpret his word, and conferred the necessary authority on the body designed to supplement and apply his legislative ordinances. Therein lies the secret of its strength, its fundamental distinction, and the guarantee against disintegration and schism." It's very powerful that actually Baha'u'lláh, in his Book of Covenant, establishes the world order, and it's elaborated in the Kitab-i-Aqdas as well, and also in the Will and Testament of Abdul Baha. these are all sacred documents from the founder and also the authorized interpreter. And then we also had the guardian as well, another authorized interpreter, elaborate the meaning of these documents and also help to lay the groundwork for the unfoldment of the administrative order of the Baha'i faith. This is unique. Before we didn't have this sort of guidance in religious history. And I think another principle which is quite important as well is it's very clear that the Baha'i institutions are not seeking to supplant the government. We don't represent any threat to the government. We believe in obedience to the government. And the guardian made this very clear. He said, let them proclaim that in whatever country they reside, and however advanced their institutions or profound their desire to enforce the laws and apply the principles enunciated by Bahá'u'lláh, they will unhesitantly subordinate the operation of such laws and the application of such principles to the requirements and legal enactments of their respective governments. Theirs is not the purpose, while endeavoring to conduct and perfect the administrative affairs of their faith, to violate under any circumstances the provisions of their country's constitution, much less to allow the machinery of their administration to supersede the government of their respective countries. I think this is a very important principle that we must always keep in mind. Now, it may be a little bit, I'm sure you have lots of questions about this whole process, and that's quite natural, because it's very difficult to visualize, exactly, how this world order will unfold. And I think we referred earlier in the conference, I think Paim and I, when we had this discussion on the prospects for global prosperity, we mentioned this beautiful passage from the writings of Shoghi Effendi, where I think he emphasizes how difficult it is to understand what the future holds. He says that all we can reasonably venture to attempt is to strive to obtain a glimpse of the first streaks of the promised dawn that must, in the fullness of time, chase away the gloom that has encircled humanity. So you can see in 5 or 6 different ways he's trying to explain how difficult it is. We can just venture to attempt, to strive, to obtain a glimpse, not even a full sight, of the first streaks of the promised dawn. Again, it all emphasizes, how difficult it is for us to understand, how glorious this new civilization will be and how it will unfold. This generation stands too close to so colossal a revelation to appreciate in their full measure the infinite possibilities of his faith, the unprecedented character of his cause, and the mysterious dispensations of his providence. And again, we are the generation of the half-light. But in a way, it doesn't matter. We are under the guidance of the House of Justice. We know that the Bab and Baha'u'lláh both, guide them. We don't know exactly how this will unfold, but I think we have faith in the ultimate, destiny, the ultimate direction of this process. And something similar was asked of Jesus. People were asking Jesus, how to build the kingdom of God on earth. And he uses such a powerful metaphor. He says it's like a mustard seed. Then Jesus asked, what is the kingdom of God like? What shall I compare it to? It is like a mustard seed, which a man took and planted in his garden. It grew and became a tree, and the birds perched in its branches. Again, when you look at a mustard seed, it's one of the smallest things you can see. It's very, very tiny. But once it's planted and cultivated, it starts to grow, and then it becomes a mighty tree, like the tree in the photograph. And that's, again, the kingdom of God. It starts off as something quite small, but in the seed, everything is there. The seed is perfect, but it's embryonic. Again, the same concept we find in many of the Baha'i writings. Shoghi Effendi says, the world order lying enshrined in Baha'u'llah's teachings is slowly and imperceptibly rising amid the welter and chaos of present-day civilization. If you look at a forest, it's very difficult to see the trees growing and the grass growing, but it's very easy to hear one of the trees fall down. That's what attracts more attention. But actually something is imperceptibly developing, is growing, just like this new civilization. The consummation of the world commonwealth will, by its very nature, be a gradual process. And then Abdu'l-Baha mentions that the kingdom of peace, salvation, uprightness, and reconciliation is founded in the invisible world, and it will by degrees become manifest and apparent through the power of the Word of God. As a result of consecrated human endeavors over decades and indeed centuries, this spiritual reality is gradually expressed in physical form. So what is our role in this process? What role do we play in the advancement of the most great peace, in the building of this new world order? And, Baha'u'llah has given us a perfect blueprint. He's given us lots of instruction manuals. We have the perfect architect, for this world order, Abdu'l-Baha. And that's what the Shoghi Effendi calls him. He calls him the perfect architect. We have guidance as well from Abdu'l-Baha and Shoghi Effendi, and we have an administrative order. And the Guardian actually says that we are a co-sharer in the building up of the New World Order, which the mind of Baha'u'llah has envisioned. So in a way, it's a do-it-yourself kit. It's not as if the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven is just going to magically descend, on the earth. We don't have to do anything. One moment we have it, one moment we don't have it, the next moment we do. It's something that we have to build. We have a duty to participate in the construction of this new world order. And if you think about it, what a privilege that is, that we, humble we, each one of us, we actually, each of us can play our role in the building of this amazing new civilization. This is a civilization that we've been waiting for millennia. In fact, all of human history, in a way, has been waiting for this moment in time. And we can participate in it. What a privilege that is. And in fact, it's really a duty. It's a responsibility that we cannot shirk. This is emphasized over and over in the Baha'i writings. Ours rather the duty, however confused the scene, however dismal the present outlook, however circumscribed the resources we dispose of, to labor serenely, confidently, and unremittingly to lend our share of assistance in whichever way circumstances may enable us to the operation of the forces which, as marshaled and directed by Baha'u'llah, are leading humanity out of the valley of misery and shame to the loftiest summits of power and glory. The exigencies of a slowly crystallizing faith impose upon them a duty that they cannot shirk, a responsibility they cannot evade. I think in the second seminar, there was a quotation about how each one of us is responsible for justice, that we each have our post. And I think you could extrapolate that and say the same thing here, that each of us has a duty, has a post. We all have a role to play in the unfoldment of this new world order. I think it's also quite beautiful that the Guardian uses the metaphor of the slowly crystallizing faith. I don't know if you know, but if you put in solution crystals, it will you'll see nothing for a long time, and then eventually you'll see a little bit of structure, and then finally you'll see actually rather rapidly a whole structure established. Oh, crystals. If you put, I forgot what you put in solution. I guess it's salt and other things. Sugar and water? Okay, sugar and water. Then amazing, for a long time you don't see anything, and then all of a sudden, this amazing structure appears. So this is a slowly crystallizing faith. And again, we're repeatedly reminded, and I'll share with you a few quotations on this theme, that this is a sacred duty. This is a duty that we cannot shirk. It is quite natural for anyone observing the present state of the world to feel very depressed and apprehensive of the future. It is indeed hard to see what lies ahead of us in the near future, but we as Baha'is, unlike most people, have absolute assurance that the distant future is serene and bright. We do not know if there will be another great war. What we do know is this, that unless people become spiritually awakened in time, great suffering, maybe in the form of war, will come upon them, for humanity must be unified, must be redeemed. If men refuse absolutely to take the easier road of faith, of seeking out God's manifestation for this age and accepting him, then they will bring upon themselves a fresh crisis in human affairs and very great affliction. What we as Baha'is must do is our duty. We cannot do other people's duty for them, alas, but we can fulfill our sacred responsibilities by serving our fellow men, living a Baha'i life, teaching the faith, and strengthening its budding world order. This was written in 1948, but I think it rings true even more today than when it was first written. And as the situation of the world deteriorates, and we have indications that things are going to get worse in the near future, and the House of Justice in their Reswan message kind of alluded to the challenges that humanity is facing, we have to redouble our efforts, not become depressed, not lose our confidence. Shoghi Effendi wrote in Citadel of Faith, "The champion builders of Baha'u'llah's rising world order must scale nobler heights of heroism as humanity plunges into greater depths of despair, degradation, and dissension and distress. Let them forge ahead into the future, serenely confident that the hour of their mightiest exertions and the supreme opportunity for their greatest exploits must coincide with the apocalyptic upheaval marking the lowest ebb in mankind's fast declining fortunes." I think we discussed on the first day how there are these two forces, at work in the world today, the forces of disintegration and the forces of integration. And they both seem to be accelerating, and they both are synchronized. And again, we use the metaphor of giving birth, that these different crises that seem to be appearing in our world, in human history, are accelerating. But they're kind of like the convulsions when a mother is giving birth. As the birth is coming closer and closer, the contractions are accelerating. And I think that's kind of the day in which we live in. Something new is being born. And the more there are crises in the world, the more space it creates for the emergence of this new world order. So on one hand, we are sad by these very negative developments, and we should grieve for the people who suffer. And many of us are suffering from them as well. But also in a way, not only these forces of destruction, but the forces of construction are preparing the way for the advancement of humanity's maturity. And in a way, this is the one hope for society. Shoghi Effendi wrote that conscious of their high calling, confident in the society-building power which their faith possesses. This is the theme of our conference. They press forward, undeterred and undismayed, in their efforts to fashion and perfect the necessary instruments wherein the embryonic world order of Baha'u'lláh can mature and develop. It is this building process, slow and unobtrusive, to which the life of the worldwide Baha'i community is wholly consecrated, that constitutes the one hope of a stricken society. For this process is actuated by the generating influence of God's changeless purpose and is evolving within the framework of the administrative order of his faith. And yesterday, I was having a conversation with one of the participants, and actually he reminded me of this beautiful statement in the Unfoldment of World Civilization, penned by Shoghi Effendi in 1936. And I think it's quite beautiful because it shows, the kind of attitude that we Baha'is must have. We must have transcending love, love for all of humanity, a love that shows, no borders, that's not based on nationality, not based on race, not based on political philosophy. It's all transcending. And this is what Baha'u'lláh has come to inculcate in each of us. Baha'u'lláh has come to transform our hearts. Shoghi Effendi has said, this universal, this transcending love which the followers of the Baha'i faith feel for their fellow men of whatever race, creed, class, or nation is neither mysterious nor can it be said to have been artificially stimulated. It is both spontaneous and genuine. They whose hearts are warmed by the energizing influence of God's creative love cherish his creatures for his sake and recognize in every human face a sign of his reflected glory. Of such men and women, it may be truly said that to them, every foreign land is a fatherland, and every fatherland is a foreign land. For their citizenship, it must be remembered, is in the kingdom of Baha'u'lláh. I think it's quite beautiful that this phrase, every foreign land is a fatherland, and every fatherland is a foreign land, comes from Justin Martyr. He was an early Christian believer in the 1st century, and this was his advice to his fellow Christian believers who were living in very difficult circumstances during the time of the Roman Empire. And I think what we must appreciate that is, if we just do nothing, or if we don't redouble our efforts, in a way we are responsible for humanity's suffering. We have a duty to share Baha'u'llah's vision so that we can alleviate this suffering and accelerate the process of the establishment of this new world. In a letter written on behalf of Shoghi Effendi in 1943, he said, "There is so much suffering, such a great and desperate need for a true remedy, and the Baha'is should realize their sacred obligation is to deliver the message to their fellow men at once and on as large a scale as possible. If they fail to do so, they are really partly responsible for prolonging the agony of humanity." This is a bit frightening. And I think in this day and age, we've talked a lot about how difficult it is to remain focused. We have so many distractions, and I know that even during my lifetime, the distractions have just multiplied. And Shoghi Effendi knew about this in 1947, but in a way, what he said in 1947, I think is even more true today than it was back then. He says, there is such a confusion in the world today, so much uncertainty, so much materialism, that it is very hard to hold the attention of even the more spiritually minded people. But we must persevere and do our best, knowing this is our duty, and that conditions will eventually change completely and follow Baha'u'llah's pattern. Again, he advises us not to get distracted. There's so many things that can distract our attention. Now a lot more than there were in the past. The Universal House of Justice actually advised us in 1963, which was the year of their election. They said, "Let each believer in his inmost heart resolve not to be seduced by the ephemeral allurements of the society around him, nor to be drawn into its feuds and short-lived enthusiasms, but instead to transfer all he can from the old world to the new one, which is the vision of his longing and will be the fruit of his labors." And I think this is something we have to be careful of. It's so easy, given our social media, our mass media, to just get sucked into these silly disputes. And it's very easy to devote so much time to following disputes that are quite silly, and to see such partisan conflict over issues, either whether it be of politics or of culture. We should be careful not to let that suck us in. That's just a time killer. It's diverting us from our true purpose. Can you imagine if the early believers, instead of focusing on the diffusion of the Bab's message and Baha'u'llah's message, they immersed themselves in the politics of the Qajar dynasty. That would have been such a waste. They had a bigger calling, a more important calling. So let's be careful not to get distracted. And again, this same notion is again referred to by Shoghi Effendi. He says, "I cannot refrain from appealing to them who stand identified with the faith to disregard the prevailing notions and the fleeting fashions of the day, and to realize as never before that the exploded theories and the tottering institutions of present-day civilization must needs appear in sharp contrast with those God-given institutions which are destined to arise from their ruin. I pray that they may realize with all their heart and soul the ineffable glory of their calling, the overwhelming responsibility of their mission, and the astounding immensity of their task." So I've lived long enough to see, many of these fleeting fashions. Throughout my life, there are different movements that have come and gone, different philosophies, even different fashion styles, that once they're very popular, everyone wants to copy them. Then within 5-10 years, they're replaced by something completely different. So we should just be very careful not to be sucked in, by these fads. And we should also be very careful about materialism. We talked about that on the first day. Again, just as a reminder, Shoghi Effendi uses this beautiful metaphor, or this very powerful metaphor, I should say, of the undertow. You're out in the ocean, everything seems calm, and then all of a sudden you're pulled by the undertow. You lose control of yourself. And I think if we're not careful, we can be pulled by the undertow of materialism. It's so pervasive in our society that we're not really conscious of it. And again, materialism is not just the pursuit of material things. As we discussed earlier, it's perfectly fine to enjoy the fruits of material civilization. There's absolutely no problem. Baha'u'llah says you can wear nice clothing, you can enjoy nice food, but you shouldn't become detached. If these material things become a barrier or a veil between you and the divine spark within, between you and God, between you and other people, then it is not healthy. People are so markedly lacking in spirituality these days that the Baha'is should consciously guard themselves against being caught into what one might call the undertow of materialism and atheism, sweeping the world these days. Skepticism, cynicism, disbelief, immorality, and hard-heartedness are rife. And as friends are those who stand for the antithesis of all these things, they should beware lest the atmosphere of the present world affects them without their being conscious of it. And the Guardian, in his last message to the American Baha'i community, warned them not to succumb to apathy, timidity, or complacency. Shoghi Effendi and Abdul Baha outlined the potential future destiny of America, but it was conditional. And I think it's quite significant that in his last message, he warns the Americans, Baha'i community, to be careful to not allow apathy, timidity, or complacency to rob them of their spiritual destiny. And I think that's really true for all of us. We need to guard against this. We see that sometimes the state of the world brings us down so much that we just lose our energy. We lose our will to continue to spread this message. And kind of knowing this in advance, knowing things are going to get worse in the near future, we can take steps to prepare. There's a saying that to be forewarned is to be forearmed. So we can prepare now for the tests that are likely to increase. The Universal House of Justice actually told us just a year ago in their Rezwan message, we are mindful that the Baha'i community itself also experiences the effects of the forces of disintegration at work in the world. Moreover, we are conscious that the greater the Friends' efforts to promote the Word of God, the stronger the countervailing forces they will encounter sooner or later from various quarters. They must fortify their minds and spirits against the tests that are sure to come, lest these impair the integrity of their endeavors. But the believers know well that whatever storms lie ahead, the arc of the cause of God is equal to them all. Successive stages of its voyage have seen it weather the elements and ride the waves. Now it is bound for a new horizon. The confirmations of the Almighty are the gusts that fill its sails and propel it towards its destination. And the covenant is its lodestar, keeping the sacred vessel on its sure and certain course. May the hosts of heaven send blessings upon all who sail within. What a beautiful image, what a beautiful metaphor. The ark of salvation, the ship of the cause of God, is going to experience lots of storms, but it won't sink. It's going to get to its destination. And in a strange way, the more successful we are in diffusing Baha'u'llah's vision of a new world order, the more tests we're going to face. The more tests. When the institutions of orthodoxy, start to appreciate the magnitude of Baha'u'llah's claim, we will face, greater and greater tests. And in a way, you kind of can see this as a huge spiritual drama, perhaps the greatest drama in the world's history, world's spiritual history being played out, on the stage of the world. There's that beautiful passage from Shakespeare, all the world is a stage and all the men and women mere players. In a way, we are a player. We have a role to play. So what is our role in this greatest, spiritual drama? Well, I think as we kind of alluded to in some of the discussions we've had at the conference, the summer school, there are kind of two plans of God. There's the major plan of God and there's the minor plan of God. The major plan of God is God's plan for humanity that we believe, he himself operates, which is tumultuous in its progress, which works through humanity as a whole, and which forges mankind into a unified body through the fires of suffering and tribulation. This is a plan that we have no control over. Its ultimate objective is the kingdom of God on earth. The working out of God's major plan proceeds mysteriously in ways directed by him alone. We cannot fully understand it, but we know that, with the coming of Baha'u'lláh, this new vibrating influence, has been released into the world, and everything is changing, everything is being reconfigured. A lot of our old institutions are being shown not to be fit for purpose and are starting to collapse. But there's also the minor plan of God, and this is something that we fully participate in. The minor plan is that part of God's plan which the Baha'is are called upon to carry out. It is clear and orderly and operates in the world through the plans, instructions, and guidance given by Abdu'l-Baha, Shoghi Effendi, and the Universal House of Justice. The minor plan that Baha'u'lláh has given us to execute as our part in his grand design for the redemption of mankind is very clearly delineated. It is to this work that we must devote all our energies, for there is no one else to do it. This is our role. This is the role that we should play. And do we have a plan? Yes, we have a plan. We have the 9-year plan. And I think, as you know, this is a plan that started a year ago. And, I have the wrong date. It should say from 2022 to 2020. It's 31. Yes, sorry about that. I'll correct that in the final version. Yeah, 31. And I think this plan is part of a series of plans that will last for the next 25 years. And actually, the House of Justice said something quite amazing in its letter to the counselors. They say that this plan, this 9-year plan that we're living in, from 2022 to 2031, will make demands of the individual believer, the community, and the institutions reminiscent of the demands that the Guardian made of the Baha'i world at the outset of the 10-year crusade. I think many of you may have read Baha'i history and realized that actually the 10-year crusade was one of the most important plans that we had. In fact, I think it was the 10-year crusade who may have even brought the Baha'i faith to Finland. It was something that was a worldwide plan. It was the first worldwide plan in the Baha'i community that started in 1953 and ended in 1963 with the election of the Universal House of Justice. And before the 10-year plan, there were, I think, only 12 national spiritual assemblies in the world. And at the conclusion of just 10 years, that had gone up to, I think, 56, which was an amazing achievement. And it really completely transformed the Baha'i faith. And I think it's quite interesting that the House of Justice is kind of alluding that there's similarities between this plan and that plan. And I think we know that this 9-year plan is very interesting because it's very much outward-looking, and it's focused on releasing the society-building power of the faith in ever greater measure. I think in the previous set of plans, we were particularly focused on expansion and consolidation. But in these series of plans over the next 25 years, I think we are much more going to be focusing on community building, on releasing this society-building power of Baha'u'lláh from the grassroots, from the bottom up. And I think that this calls for a lot more. The House of Justice, has mentioned that, we need to be engaged in society building. We need to improve not only the Baha'i community, but when we think about community, we should think about the community in which we live in, not just the Baha'i community. The House of Justice, in their letter of 2021 to the counselors, said, building a society that consciously pursues this collective purpose of the betterment of the world means learning how to raise up vibrant, outward-looking communities. It means those communities learning how to bring about spiritual and material progress. It means learning how to contribute to the discourses that influence the direction of that progress. Seen from one perspective, they are quite distinct, each having its own characteristics and imperatives. Yet, they all represent ways of awakening the energies latent in the human soul and channeling them towards the betterment of society. Together, they are a means of releasing what the Guardian described as the society-building power of the faith. I think it's quite interesting. I haven't had a chance to actually do it yet. It was on my list to do before the summer school, but unfortunately I didn't do it, but I think all of us should do it. there were a series of letters that were written by the House of Justice on the plan, to the Baha'i community, also in the Reswan messages, and also in the letter to the counselors. And it'd be interesting to see how many times, this concept is mentioned of releasing the society-building power of the faith, or community-building power of the faith. Over and over again in these letters, that same phrase or similar phrases are used, because I think that's so important. I think what the House of Justice is saying is that, we are getting a bit stronger. This evolutionary process is building. We're now reaching the stage where we can think about community building. And in the 2023 letter, we saw that the House of Justice also talked about improving the health, of our local communities, improving the environment in our local communities, promoting the arts in our local communities, the communities in where we live. So I'm sure this is an evolutionary process, but I think, the House of Justice is asking us to expand our vision, because ultimately we know that, the primary mission of Baha'u'lláh was not to introduce a new theology, but it was to actually create a divine civilization. I'll just wrap up. I'm getting close to the end. Sorry about that. We know that social action is very much part of this. It's not just expansion and consolidation. And I think this passage from a letter from 2008 of the House of Justice is quite significant, because I think sometimes we are reluctant to engage in social action because we think it's political. But I think the House of Justice is kind of explaining to us that there are two types of politics. There's one type of politics that we should avoid like the plague, and there's another type of politics that we should fully engage in. The term politics can have a broad meaning, and therefore it is important to distinguish between partisan political activity and the discourse and action intended to bring about constructive social change. While the former is prescribed, the latter is enjoined. Indeed, a central purpose of the Baha'i community is social transformation. Innumerable passages in the Baha'i writings encourage the believers to contribute to the betterment of the world. Baha'is must, therefore, be tireless in addressing, through word and deed, a range of social issues. And once again, I think Abdu'l-Baha set the standard. He wrote The Secret of Divine Civilization in a way that was an incredibly political book. It was advising Iran how it could reform. There was a big reform movement in the 1870s. This book was written in 1875, in the middle of that process. And Abdu'l-Baha was trying to influence and make suggestions on how this could happen, and also giving suggestions for all of humanity. But the book is entirely nonpartisan. It doesn't get into party politics. It does not criticize any faction. There is no us versus them in this book, and I think Abdu'l-Baha really sets the standard. Another important thing we need to learn to do is to engage in discourse. We need to participate in discussion about some of the big issues that affect society, but also our communities. Closely connected with the capacity for engaging in social action is a capacity for contributing to the discourses of society. At heart, this is simply a capacity for participating in a conversation about a matter that affects people's lives and offering a perspective grounded in Baha'i principles and Baha'i experience. Viewed in this way, it is a skill which many Baha'is have the opportunity to practice almost daily, for instance, in their studies or occupations, and which is cultivated through involvement in institute courses. And I think we need to learn how to really speak to every type of person in every type of space. In the Reswan message, I think it was in 2017, which was the bicentenary of the birth of Baha'u'lláh, they explained to us that a new period was emerging where we had a unique opportunity to speak to every kind of person in every kind of space. No one should be excluded, but we need to prepare. You'll see from this quotation, which I won't read, but where Abdu'l-Baha is explaining to us that we need to engage in study. We need to learn how to engage in discourse with others. We need to learn how to use language which is understandable to others and which touches their hearts. And we also need to cultivate a thirst for study. In fact, the House of Justice, in their letter to the counselors, explained that the Friends' efforts to increase their understanding of the faith and its teachings are, of course, not limited to participation in the Institute process. Indeed, one strong indicator of an Institute's effectiveness is the thirst it cultivates within those who engage with its materials to contribute to the study of the cause of Baha'u'lláh, individually but also collectively, whether in formal spaces created by the institutions or in more informal settings. Beyond the study of the revelation itself, the implications that the teachings hold for countless fields of human endeavor are of great importance. Given the vastness of the ocean of the revelation, it will be apparent that exploring its depths is a lifelong occupation of every soul who would tread the path of service. And I think one of the wonderful things about this summer school is it provides us an opportunity to delve deeper into Baha'u'llah's revelation. And also when we go back home, hopefully many of you will restudy, in particular, the World Order letters. They're so powerful. They were written in the 1930s, but actually they're more true today than when they were written, almost a century ago. And we shouldn't be discouraged by the smallness of our numbers. Though the society which incarnates its ideals may be small, and its direct and tangible benefits as yet inconsiderable, yet the potentialities with which it has been endowed and through which it is destined to regenerate the individual and rebuild a broken world are incalculable. You also see in this picture this interesting quotation from Margaret Mead. Margaret Mead was a very famous cultural anthropologist. She said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." And I think we need to remember to be steadfast. My wife recently and I came across this very powerful statement that was attributed to Abdu'l-Baha. Abdu'l-Baha sent Lua Getzinger to India on a mission to spread and diffuse Baha'u'llah's teachings. And he knew it would be difficult, but these are the instructions he gave her. And I think the instructions that he gave Lua Getzinger are applicable to us as well. He says, "Thou must be firm and unshakable in thy purpose, and never let any outward circumstances worry thee. Look at me. Thou dost not know 1,000 parts of the difficulties and seemingly insurmountable passes that rise daily before my eyes. I do not heed them. I am walking in my chosen highway. I know the destination. Hundreds of storms and tempests may rage furiously around my head. Hundreds of Titanics may sink to the bottom of the sea. The mad waves may rise to the roof of heaven. All these will not change my purpose, will not disturb me in the least. I will not look either to the right or to the left. I am looking ahead, far, far. Piercing through the impenetrable darkness of the night, the howling winds, the raging storms, I see the glorious light beckoning me. Forward, forward. The balmy weather is coming, and the voyager shall land safely. To this lofty summit of unchanging purpose, thou must attain. Nothing must shake thy firm faith." And let's remember, there's not much time left. There's no time to lose. The Guardian repeatedly told the believers, there's no time to lose. I think that's even more true today. There is no time to lose. There is no room left for vacillation. Multitudes hunger for the bread of life. The stage is set. The firm and irrevocable promise is given. God's own plan has been set in motion. It is gathering momentum with every passing day. The powers of heaven and earth mysteriously assist in its execution. Such an opportunity is irreplaceable. Let the doubter arise and himself verify the truth of such assertions. To try to persevere is to ensure ultimate and complete victory. The field is indeed so immense, the period so critical, the cause so great, the workers so few, the time so short, the privilege so priceless, that no follower of the faith of Baha'u'lláh, worthy to bear his name, can afford a moment's hesitation. So I'm just going to conclude with this last slide to just paint you a little bit of an image of the glorious future that awaits humanity. You know, maybe we won't see it, but hopefully or for sure our descendants will see it. Who can doubt that such a consummation, the coming of age of the human race, must signalize in its turn the inauguration of a world civilization such as no mortal eye hath ever beheld or human mind conceived? Who is it that can imagine the lofty standard which such a civilization, as it unfolds itself, is destined to attain? Who can measure the heights to which human intelligence, liberated from its shackles, will soar? Who can visualize the realms which the human spirit, vitalized by the outpouring light of Baha'u'lláh, shining in the plenitude of its glory, will discover? So thank you very much for your patience. Sorry, this presentation was a bit longer than the previous ones, but I couldn't resist. And if there are any questions or comments, it'd be wonderful to hear from you. Thank you.